Welcome to Pennsylvania in Focus. I'm Kristen Smith, Pennsylvania editor for the Center Square. And joining me today after a 1-week hiatus is our Pennsylvania reporter, Anthony Hennin. Welcome back. We missed you terribly. He's waving. You can't see it. But this week, Anthony got right back into it. And one of his first stories was about school vouchers, where it's an ongoing story that we've been covering in Pennsylvania. But Anthony covered a hearing in Philadelphia about this. And so, Anthony, why don't you talk to us a little bit about who was here at this hearing with House Republicans and what they had to say?
Yeah, so this is an ongoing saga that we have seen much of in recent months. Also this week, we have hearings going on about the Basic Education Funding Commission and how Pennsylvania can fund education across the state in a fair manner, according to a recent court decision back in February. So as that's been going on, Republicans have still been very emphatic on their support for school vouchers, for their Lifeline Scholarship program, and this is another derivation of that. The House Republican Policy Committee met on Tuesday to hear from education professionals, students, parents on how they would benefit and how important this is to the Commonwealth and to the Commonwealth's education system. As we heard from a few of the state representatives there, Martina White, who represents a district in Philadelphia, she argues, "I've been fighting to give parents greater freedom in choosing a school best for their children instead of being trapped in a one-size-fits-all education system that unfortunately has been failing our children for far too long." Likewise, Representative Josh Kale, who's out in western Pennsylvania around Beaver County, argued that the current way that Pennsylvania offers public education is a 19th century system that is just not working for today's children. We can provide relief through some policies if we actually deliver on what we promise to do. So, this is also, these hearings are very clearly coming from the background of Republicans working out a deal with Governor Josh Shapiro to fund a scholarship program that would allow some low-income students in low-performing districts to get a scholarship to attend other public schools or private schools as part of the budget deal that Shapiro then backed out of. And so they're still, clearly upset that they almost were able to establish something, and then that fell apart.
And I think you mentioned something here that we talk about often, but we don't really get into too deeply. When you're talking about low-income students in low-performing school districts, I think there is this perception out there that private schools only serve rich kids and rich families. And the fact of the matter is, as we've heard time and time again, is that these children are not only low income, but they are second language or English language learners. They have, learning disabilities. They are very much reflective of the population that's in public schools, except that they are bound to schools that are unable to provide the services they need, not because their staff is incompetent, not because of anything that, these teachers or educators could do. A lot of them are working with what they have. The problem is our funding system is inadequate. It's broken as determined by the courts. And there are fewer resources for some of these schools. And so the arguments that we've been hearing are, let's transition these kids to private schools where they might be able to better address these. There's smaller populations in private schools, but also they can also give money to schools that are struggling. We see a lot of these in the school district of Philadelphia, which is why it's so often a place where this is discussed. It's a point of contention. And so I think that defining who that population really is something that gets lost in the rhetoric here. And I think we heard from some of those parents who really exemplify those concerns. Can you talk a little bit about, why some of these parents, parents who say that they don't agree with Republicans, for a matter of fact, why they agree with this idea of school vouchers?
Yeah, so we heard from one parent, Kimma Brewington, who before she got into her testimony, she specified that she does not terribly agree with Republicans on many issues. She said, "I am a diehard Democrat, but this goes beyond our politics." She was arguing for the benefits that school choice brings her as a mother around Philadelphia, and giving the option of finding a school with a better fit. She spoke of her daughter, who was a high academic performance student, and her son, who struggled more. And she argued, just the frustration she had of trying to find the right fit or find the right school. And she said every parent cannot have another full-time job scouring the internet for grants, for tuition coverage, for scholarships. And she spoke, the risk that runs with her son, quote, being around the wrong people, which to throw away years of hard work in public school. This was a common refrain as well when we were specifically talking about Philadelphia, of the concern of parents, of students, that schools they would be required to go to simply are not safe and simply cannot be a strong learning environment. Jaslyn Vasquez Gonzalez, who attended Little Flower Catholic High School, which is a private high school in North Philadelphia, she spoke of just the divide between her education experience and her friends. And she argued money should not be the reason that a kid doesn't receive the education they deserve. If she had not gone to this private Catholic school, she said the alternative was the local public school, where she heard of, quote, ongoing stories of fights and misguidance. In Philadelphia, public schools are progressively showing signs of violence and unsafety, she said. In Philadelphia, not all public schools are failing their students, but there are too many that are. So a big argument that we've seen from Republicans and Democrats around Philadelphia is that school choice really gives families the chance to have better education outcomes, to go to a school that's more safe and that has less of a risk of their kids falling in with the wrong crowd. And that really seems to be motivating a lot of people around Philadelphia when they do support school choice.
And then kind of stepping back to the statewide view of this, because again, we often focus on Philadelphia when we talk about this issue, but statewide, we're seeing public schools with, abysmal literacy rates and math scores. I think something like 30% of third graders are at reading level. So this is not just a problem that is affecting inner city schools. I mean, we could talk all day about how the pandemic affected learning and the resultant learning loss, but it's something that every parent is grappling with now. And I think that's why it's becoming harder to ignore, because it's not just something that's limited to the inner city, where a lot of families that don't live there, 2/3 of the state, they just don't have an understanding of how this would change lives. But I think we're just seeing a big change in that. And Republicans here are like a dog with a bone. So what did your sense, and you have to speculate here a little bit, but what did your sense of what's coming next? Is there any thought that we might move forward with some sort of school choice? Did you get any sense of any of that?
Yeah, I think it's hard to say. Despite the veto, Governor Shapiro still says that he's committed to, some form of the school choice. Whether that's a legitimate opening or not, it's so far unclear, but Republicans are not dropping this anytime soon. Clint Owlett, who is a representative up in the northern tier of Pennsylvania, he said, I don't think the issue is dead. I think we're going to continue to work on this. There are a number of us trying to get this done because it's the right thing to do. So I think on that level, Republicans are not going to drop this anytime soon, even if they may not be able to make some significant progress. But at the same time, I think even outside these contentious places around Philadelphia or some of these urban school districts, public schooling and the decisions made there have become more contentious in recent years. We've seen this especially around the Philadelphia suburbs, where it's not necessarily battles over school choice, but battles over policy decisions, be they COVID-related, be they some of these cultural issues. So even if school choice does not necessarily result in any hard legislation like we've seen in other states, I think still it's going to be a powerful motivator for a lot of parents and a lot of people focused on policy, whether they're in a large city, whether they're out in the suburbs. This is not going away. Whether we see much movement on it is too early to say.
Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com. For Anthony Hennon, this is Kristen Smith. Please subscribe, and thanks for listening.